What's up YouTube? My name is Caden and you're watching Gas It Garage. Today, I decided to do a bonus video and show you how to clean a carburetor on a pit bike. Alright guys, so here we have my SSR 70cc pit bike, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to clean the carburetor, because this one is pretty dirty as you can see. So here's what you're going to need: a can of carburetor cleaner, needle nose pliers, a socket wrench with an 8mm socket or whatever size you need to remove these bolts right here to get the carburetor off, and then also a couple of different size flatheads and a Phillips head, and then a clean paper towel or a shop towel. So before we get started, I just wanted to say that it really doesn't matter what size pit bike style engine you have, because all of the carburetors on these pit bike style engines, other than the size and maybe some minor differences, they're pretty much the same. And they all share basically the same principles. You have the round slide throttle right here, you have the intake on this side, and then the intake manifold on this side. And then you have a fuel line going in, you have a bowl, and then some adjustments right here. But the point is, most of these carburetors on these pit bikes are pretty much the same. So enough said about that, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you want to do to start removing this carburetor is first take off the air filter. I know some pit bikes do have an air box, so if yours does, you'll need to remove that, but this one just has a basic pod air filter that quite honestly desperately needs to be cleaned. And then you can remove the fuel line. And you'll need to make sure that your fuel is off up there before you start to take off the fuel line, otherwise you will spill gas everywhere, which is not a good thing. So the next thing you're going to want to do is remove the carburetor from the intake manifold. This specific one has two 8mm bolts, but others may differ in the bolt size, but there's usually just two bolts holding it on. They're pretty easy to remove. All right, now we have our carburetor, so the last thing we need to disconnect is the throttle, which is pretty easy to do. You just unscrew this and pull out the slide. Now, whenever you remove the carburetor from an engine, you always want to plug off the intake with a paper towel. All right, so now that we have the carburetor off, you're going to want to turn it upside down and drain most of the fuel out of it. It's probably best to go get a new rag after this, because it is just gasoline, it will evaporate. All right, we have a new rag, so the next thing you want to do now that the fuel is drained out is remove the two screws holding the fuel bowl on. All right, so now that we have this thing apart, you want to take this little pin right here, push it out, remove it, and then remove the float along with the needle right there. Then you want to grab a screwdriver and remove the jets. You need to be careful though, because these are brass and you don't want to force too hard, otherwise they can strip out. All right, so now that we have the two jets out right here, next thing you want to do is take your carb spray and then spray out the jets. You only need a little bit. And then you spray out all the little holes in here. And also spray out the carburetor bowl. And then if there is any junk in there, you can scrape it out with a screwdriver. You also want to make sure the needle is clean. Now, as for the carburetor itself, basically what you want to do is just spray out every single hole you can find on this thing. All right, now that the carburetor is sprayed out and the jets are put back in, I can take the float along with the needle here, place the needle back onto here, just like this. It can be a little tricky to get back on there. And then place the needle into the hole like this, and then put the pin back in to hold the float. And I'm going to spray this out one more time just to make sure there's no debris left in there. And don't worry if there is carb spray left inside of this, because carb spray, just like gasoline, is very, very flammable. And then we need to replace the bowl. And you want to align this the same way it came out. First, we need to put the gasket back on, and I actually need to clean the gasket too. These gaskets can be tricky to put back in. You just got to kind of work it a little bit. And line everything up. And then put the screws back in. And then I'm also just going to spray off the outside of this thing just to kind of get it clean. I'm going to put my fingers over the holes as best I can to prevent any debris from getting back inside the carburetor that we just cleaned. All right, now that the carburetor is clean, we can reinstall it on the engine. I already took the paper towel out, and then you put the slide back in and make sure the slot on the side of the slide lines up with the little piece sticking out on the inside of the carburetor, because it only goes in one way. We're going to test, make sure we have full throttle. And we do, and we also have idle. So now I can reinstall this carburetor on this engine, and I'm also going to replace the fuel filter while I'm at it. Alright guys, we got the carburetor clean and I replaced the fuel filter, so let's see if this thing starts up. So I actually had to adjust the valves on this thing because they were out of spec and this thing didn't have adequate compression. So it should start now. Well, okay, it runs. All right, so I think that thing only died just because I didn't give it a chance to warm up, but it does run now and it starts a whole lot easier, probably because I adjusted the valves on it because it didn't have a whole lot of compression because the valve was out of spec, but I showed you how to clean the carburetor and that was the goal of this video. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment, and I will see you in the next video.